Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Integrative You Radio. And we're all already laughing because we pretty much already started the podcast and then now we're pressing record. So here we are, but we have an amazing guest that I am very, very excited to introduce. And of course, we also have Dr. Nick here with me. Maybe Dr. Nick will get to talk. I don't know. We'll see.
I doubt it.
But
otherwise, it's going to be a very boring podcast. Trust me.
We have Dr. Jay Lombard, and we were introduced, has it been maybe almost a year ago now? And I was very, very fortunate to be working with an individual that I was able to collaborate with Dr. Lombard and get exposed to all of his amazing brilliance when it comes to neurology and neurodegenerative conditions. So I really want him to lead with a little bit more about himself because he's, technically, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes for those of you that are listening and not watching, a neurologist for 30 years, but he's really evolved that into something really special. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about what you were saying before I pressed record.
Okay, great. So after I finished my residency in neurology, which was, I think, in 1995, I somehow was on the front end of the autism pandemic, which what it really was at that point, because during my residency, I didn't see a single patient with autism, not one. And my first year as an attending, I saw probably 300 cases in the first year of my practice. First year. So I did a lot of work with developmental delay children, autism, Asperger's. And what I found is that there was significant overlap between a psychiatric diagnosis in their parents, autoimmune disease in their parents, and a very strong history of gut dysbiosis. Where in the first kids that we saw, we actually were able to culture Clostridium infection in those children. And this is before anybody talked about the brain-gut connection or the brain-immune connection. We were just overwhelmed with these patients and trying to figure out what was wrong with them. And the persistent complaint they had was diarrhea. I kind of got bored with that area because I have a little bit of ADD. And decided to redirect my focus for neurodegenerative diseases, which I began seeing many, many patients with ALS and Parkinson's disease, to the point where I became so disenfranchised with neurology that I took probably an 8-year hiatus, thinking I was smart and building a biotech company, which I did for 8 years, kind of in a way of my thoughts were that if I could teach what I do, I wouldn't have to work anymore. But that didn't go well. Ended up going back into practice in 2018, and I began seeing a series of ALS patients. And this without any marketing, because I was a very popular physician in New York back in the early 2000s up until 2010, and I basically became invisible after that point. So I was like, okay, what do I do? Hang up a shingle and see what happens. And the first ALS patients I began seeing all had intractable reflux and or debilitating constipation. So I started thinking, okay, this is very similar to the history of patients I had seen with autism. What's really going on here? So I began, doing stool analyses, and like other doctors that do stool analysis tests, found things that were interesting, but also, I think, many ways distracting. And what I mean by that is that, the development of, all these, probiotics and, this is the best probiotic. This is, the real way of treating, dysbiosis. I also thought became a departure from our understanding about what we were seeing and what it actually meant. And in conclusion to that, what we were discussing before you didn't hit record, Nicole, was that my conclusion about a vast number of neurological diseases, everything from autism to Alzheimer's to ALS, are dimensionally similar in regards to their pathology, although they're categorically distinct in terms of their symptomatology. And I think because of that distinction, we are now treating diseases categorically as opposed to dimensionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to go off of what you're talking about, you went more into the dimension aspect with us. So really, Dr. Lombard was talking about how, we tend to diagnose based on specifics. But then if we take a step back, we can actually, instead of just looking at the difference, we can also look at what's similar with all these different types of diseases. We have glial cell overactivation and a lot of them. And with the glial cells, it's just, you could think of it as the lymphatic portion of your brain. It's your glymphatic because it's glial cells, but you can think of it as like the detox center for your brain that's overactive due to some type of toxin, some type of infection, things like that.
It's actually interesting. It's not overactive. In fact, it's the opposite. So the glymphatic system, which I'm glad you brought up because that's part of my research right now, is understanding the glymphatic system, is, like you said, a lymphatic system of the brain that's coupled to glial cells, which are the cells that actually promote inflammation or lack thereof. So the glial cells recognize basically misfolded proteins. And those misfolded proteins have to be transported to the glymphatic system. And think of the glymphatic system as a cesspool, okay, where the brain is bathed in the spinal fluid, that the glymphatic system is responsible to release all these bad proteins that are blocking up the system, that they can circulate through the spinal fluid and then be degraded. And what happens in aging, particularly, and particularly in patients that have chronic sleep disorders, because I find that the biggest single most risk factor for any neurological disease, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, epilepsy, go down the list, is disruption in the sleep architecture. And why is that important? Because the sleep architecture is what primarily primes the glymphatic system. And it primes it when people go into what's called a N3 or deep REM sleep. So yes, the glymphatic system, I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because I think that's a very important point to discuss today.
Well, and
I have so many questions.
What you're talking about, the misfolded proteins just being prions, which is interesting with prions, is that there's, how do I want to explain it? There's infectious prions and there's non-infectious prions. And what's cool is
that's a misnomer by the way.
So really? Because what's interesting?
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah. So I want to say one thing, and then I want you to prove me wrong. I'm big at looking at, when you talked about dimensions, I'm big at looking at everything through geometry, through the mathematics of geometry and the shapes of energy.
Yes.
So when you look at, when they say a non-infectious, it's actually in that spherical aspect. And then when you get into the infectious, it's the cube. And that all has different energies behind it through the display. But if you say that's not real, I'm interested in learning about that.
I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, Nick, because I knew nothing other about you from Nicole other than that you're a great therapist. I didn't realize how deep your brain actually works. So,
you don't even know.
I don't have any friends.
You may not get a question in here, by the way. I just realizing this may go fairly deep before you get to ask your question.
I'm going to sit back.
let me explain why it's not a binary thing. Because when people say infectious prions versus non-infectious prions, they're making an artificial distinction. And let me tell you what that artificial distinction actually is. All life. Wow, that's just got an echo here to show you what hyperbole I'm about to say. Comes from comes from retrotransposons, which were the first forms of life. And they were pure RNA, no DNA in them whatsoever. Retrotransposons are genomic parasites, which means they're able to infect everything, including viruses. We all have retrotransposons in our bodies. So the idea that the infection's exogenous to us is also a misnomer, because we contain a significant percentage of even the viral genome in the human genome. Mm-hmm. And that problem is what causes autoimmune disease, because when the body sees something that it's not clear if it's infectious or non-infectious, for what you're describing, creates significant elevations of cytokines and pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are the first phase of a neurological disease. And what happens over time is that the immune system becomes fatigued. So most patients that I see are actually immunosenescent. They're not. They don't have active immune systems. They have actually underactive immune systems. And I'll let Nicole ask her question.
Now there's more questions that I have. So what you're talking about here with these retrotransposons, can you explain to me the correlation then to retroviruses? And are you saying that because retroviruses are endogenous and it's the imbalance, the activation of these retroviruses that is then creating the misfolded endogenous proteins, which is then affecting the neurological system?
And let me tell you how they do that. So
that's what I want to know.
I tell you something. I am sort of an autodidactic virologist, meaning that I've taught myself everything there is to know, and there's a lot more to know. So that's like, in terms of virology, we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And that's been sort of my deep understanding of virology. So here's what viruses do. They're really very, very clever. They actually infect. Not most. We think of most viruses either being DNA viruses or RNA viruses, but ultimately all of the pathology is produced through the viral portion of the viral genome. And what they do is they literally hijack host RNA metabolism. It's like they're hijacking the plane, and they're saying, you know what, we're no longer going to be able to produce. Guess what? We're going to basically cut off the head of the host nucleus, so it's unable to respond to the infection as a way of taking over the body. I mean, they're really like just the most evil, things on the planet. So that's kind of what they do. Once they control our RNA metabolism, it's very hard to push back, therapeutically, and even our understanding about what to do next.
So speaking about,
I'm going to go there.
And hold on really quick.
Go ahead, Nick. I'm going to go there after.
We get to alternate.
I don't know if we're doing parallel counseling here, I hope.
Right. I'm always looking at the body through, at first, the psychosomatic, because from my understanding, the flow of energy is going from, like, we think body, mind, spirit, but energy flows above, down, inside out. So it's going from the spirit to the mind to the body.
Absolutely.
Energy is, bidirectional. So we have, of course, the environmental stress coming back in to, show us how well we're putting ourselves into an environment. But with the psychosomatic, have you found, because nothing's black and white, like you said, the binary is not really, true, especially when we get to the quantum realm. But it seems like there's a lot of viruses that tend to show up in specific areas of the body. So like psychosomatic, you're having an emotional imbalance, and that imbalance is going to be stored in specific areas, specific organs, different tissues in the body. So like HSV6, HSV7, it tends to be more neurological, tends to be more in the brain. HSV1, of course, the mouth, but then that can go up to the brain.
Do you guys know why that's the case?
Why they're all showing up in different places, or
no? Why are these viruses particularly producing psychiatric and neurological symptoms?
We want to hear from you.
The very simple answer. They're neurotrophic viruses. They hunt the brain. That's why people that have these conditions develop neurological and psychiatric symptoms, because they're affecting our nervous system.
So they're just pretty much, there's viruses classified like there's respiratory viruses, there's neurotropic viruses. Does that make sense?
So again, when, what's people don't realize is that RSV is a neurotrophic virus. COVID is also a neurotrophic virus. And the way they get that designation is based upon the what's called the pleiotropic preferences of these viruses. These viruses like infecting neurons. And the reason they like infecting neurons is because they get a whole food supply, because the brain is the most enriched supply per tissue of glucose. So like, where are we going to eat?
But do you feel like there are certain viruses that can prey on all different types of tissue, and that really comes back to vulnerable tissue because that tissue is already damaged, that tissue is already unhealthy?
It's a fantastic question. So what prevents the permeability of viruses is the endothelial layer of the blood system. It's not just the brain, it's also,
which is unfortunately
kidneys,
damaged in most people.
Exactly. So, looking at glycocalyx as a rebuilding strategy can potentially help reduce the ability of these viruses to migrate, because they migrate through the vascular system. That's why very often you see patients that have evidence of microvascular disease on their, Raynaud's phenomena, for instance, and all sorts of other peripheral symptoms related to their neurological symptoms. So, of course, these viruses, they don't like borders. Put it that way.
Yeah. So I have a question related to COVID. There has been different embalmers that have been coming forward in relation to proteins that they're finding in actually the arterial system. And I'm just curious thinking about that specific virus and because it's all somewhat unknown, because it's all so new and they're seeing all of these different things. And I was curious if you had any insight around what that is doing from a misfolded proteins perspective.
Right. Maybe let's start by talking about misfolded proteins, because I'm not sure if the audience, understands that terminology. But if they do, then so misfolded proteins, the best analogy for misfolded proteins is to think about basketballs that have no air in them, meaning that you're not able to bounce the basketball. So what happens in neurological diseases is that not only is there deflation of these basketballs, there's also an inability to remove them once they're formed. So the two challenges in medicine are, how do you prevent protein misfolding? And how do you remove the proteins already misfolded?
Yeah. Because they're not something that can be killed. They're not, a live organism. So that's another
Correct.
factor. Some people think, I'm going to take a bunch of different herbal agents and be able to eradicate this. And it's just not how it works.
And that's why sleep's such a big issue, because when you sleep and you have that deep REM sleep, you also have the highest amounts of melatonin going through the body to be able to help detox.
Yep.
So when go ahead.
I was just thinking, and I haven't actually shared this, even talked to you about it yet, Nicole. It just kind of sparked a thought when you said this. Well, with those embalmers, and I don't know if it's because it's just after the fact based on time, but it seems like a lot of those clots, which sometimes look like parasites, sometimes look like actual blood clots. It's hard to tell exactly without being there and doing it. And I don't know exactly enough, and that's why I wanted to ask you, Jay. Do you know much about like neuromelanin being in the blood?
No, I never heard that before.
So I just read it like 2 weeks ago, and I haven't had a chance to do any research on it yet. So that's why I was interested. But I guess it creates like a kind of like a black clotting factor. But I guess I'll do some research on that.
Okay.
So do you find that one of the common themes in neurodegenerative diseases is viruses and these misfolded proteins?
Right.
And my other
And
question around this is go ahead.
Yeah, let me try to explain that in a deeper way. What happens is that there are proteins in the human body that are called intrinsically disordered proteins, or IDPs. These proteins are highly unstable proteins, meaning that they're unstable for a good reason, not a bad reason, because they're adaptive proteins. And the way that they're adaptive is by changing what's called the phosphorylation status of those proteins. So think of a fan that's oscillating, and the oscillation occurs by the presence or absence of these light molecules, PO4, phosphate.
Mm-hmm.
What viruses do is they basically put a brake on those proteins. And that's true for virtually every protein that has been associated with ALS in particular, but also in Parkinson's disease. That's where the defect is. So the virus is like, look, you know what? You depend upon the adequate function of these fans, which are basically microtubules in the cell. Let's just cut the energy off.
So that's probably, I mean, when you think about, we've talked about a little bit of how everything goes wrong. One of the first initial steps is just getting the body energy so it can actually utilize the ability to detox, but also to have that aspect to regenerate and repair.
Exactly. Yep. And you know what I discovered about that? It's very interesting because I was one of the early adapters of photobiomodulation therapy. And I had a case of a adolescent that was misdiagnosed with bipolar for several years, who ended up having a diagnosis of something called Klein-Levin syndrome. And Klein-Levin syndrome is due to antibodies to the hypothalamus, particularly after viral infections. And it presents with highly moody kids. Now, people who have adolescents don't all think that they have Klein-Levin syndrome. It's a relatively rare syndrome, but it's characterized by like 3 or 4 or 5 or even a week or two of sleep, like where they get up only for maybe an hour or 2 hours going forward. Okay. And the abnormality in these patients then leads to a cyclical problem where they're awake, hypomanic, and have virtually no memory or no concern about the 2 or 3 week period that they were in this kind of stupor. And when they're in the stupor, they literally and this is on looking at EEG studies. This is not just imagination. They're in a semi-dream state. So they're like in a waking sleep state, and it's called Klein-Levin syndrome. So because I have a reputation of being sort of the Sherlock Holmes of medicine, I got a referral from one of the sleep specialists at Stanford who's treating this kid. And I'm like, okay, well, why not try something, because nothing is working for them. So I put them on a program where I gave near infrared light through the nasal areas, through something called V-Light, which is a commercial company that delivers certain levels of light into the nasal septum. And the reason why I like that more than I like these larger helmets is because you're getting light directly into the hypothalamus through the olfactory bulb. So it's like a direct source of light. And I told them that I want you to drink very high concentrate wheatgrass, and I forgot, intense amount of blueberries crushed up, raspberries crushed up into like just a puree of these things, and take it an hour and a half before you actually go under this treatment. And the parents were these very anxious people from New Jersey. Not that people from New Jersey have a high level of anxiety, but they were from New Jersey and had a high level of anxiety. And they were very nervous because the kid had gone through so many different types of treatments that none of them worked. They're like, I go, look, the worst that's going to happen is nothing's going to happen. But I'll give you my cell phone number just in case you have any concerns. And she called me on the weekend, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, you know,
here we go.
I'm like, you know, do I pick up this call? I go, I promised her I would. So I pick up the call, and she goes, my God, Dr. J. She goes, my son is back. I go, what do you mean he's back? Like, that's impossible. It's like only 3 days that you took this program. He had completely restored his circadian rhythms after 3 days.
That's amazing.
So, so if you ask about, you know, how to, my philosophy is that there's an AM approach and a PM approach, which are entirely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it interesting that I was just going to say, sometimes it's going more basic. You know, I think a lot of times we think in medicine, it has to be this really elaborate treatment in order to resolve these, you know, these symptoms. And sometimes it's something as, let's flood your body with a lot of antioxidants and light therapy, which is something that's very underrated.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's underrated perceptually, but we're electromagnetic beings. So when you think of energy, we can communicate that way. We can communicate through electromagnetic means, whether it's through, you know, light, low-level laser, PMF devices, scalar energy. The body's, you know, we have literally like little Tesla engines inside of us. So we can use all those different forms to be able to pretty much create almost like a magnet, and to create that flow of energy of the positive and negative ions. And that can, like a battery, can help to recharge itself.
And yes, that's exactly right.
So I want to hear about your research. I'm sure we've covered bits and pieces of it thus far in the conversation, but with all of the work that you've been doing on neurodegenerative conditions, ALS in particular, what is the standout thing that you feel like is what no one is talking about, number one, and number two is really one of the game changers that's really helping to create more thorough healing for these individuals?
Beautiful question. What I found, and this, I think, Nick, basically going back to your comment before Nicole's question, is what happens when we diagnose a person with ALS or Parkinson's disease. We put them into a state of PTSD, which they're already in, given the fact that they know something's wrong with their body. But then we put the icing on the cake by saying, you know what, I agree with Dr. So-and-so's opinion, you know, you have ALS. Just that mention of that produces such a significant, deep psychological trauma. And that also particularly occurs in patients who have head injury, who automatically have PTSD. Every person with a head injury has to have PTSD, because who would not be concerned about getting hit in the head by, you know, a sledgehammer, or if you're an NFL player, by, you know, being tackled. So the idea that PTSD and TBI are separate entities is another mistake that's categorical, not dimensional, because dimensionally they're the same. So what happens from a existential level or a spiritual level or an energetic level, whatever way you want to try to describe it, is that the brain goes into what's called a self-apoptosis process, meaning it's not going to believe it's alive. It means that it's lost all hope. It means that it's better to check out, either, you know, like in a self-inflicted way, God forbid, or just checking out existentially. And that creates a cascade of negative signals that are received by every cell in the body that, look, my life is no longer, worth living for. So one of the first things I found about my patients who've had success dealing with Parkinson's and ALS, and the good news is I've had very significant. And I won't say I've cured any patient, because I think cure is a very, very slippery slope word, but I've been able to feel it that I've been able to adequately stabilize patients with these conditions. And the first way you stabilize them is through sort of centralizing them to the point that they have purpose and that there is hope.
100%. Every single neurodegenerative case I've had, it's the first thing we focus on is self-depreciation. There's more breakdown than build up. And that's when you think about it, simply put, it's like that's creating the break of the communication through the cell signaling, through the neurological signaling. So it's like we have to get that back into a state of equanimity, a state of balance, and that stress from the mind can actually allow the body, that. Okay.
And I find one of the easiest ways of actually doing that is basically there's a device called heart math. I'm not sure if either of you are familiar with heart math, but certainly your listeners may not be. So heart math was discovered by the cardiologist who discovered heart rate variability back in the 1970s. And they figured out that if you could measure heart rate variability, you can actually be able to through your own autonomic nervous system, control heart rate variability. And they created this very, very inexpensive device that comes in the mail. It's like only maybe $200, where they put a sensor in the earlobe to measure heart rate variability, and having the ability going forward to allow people to self-teach themselves how to regulate their autonomic nervous system by assessing heart rate variability. Now, I find this extremely useful even for myself, because people say, oh, well, you just meditate or go into this mindfulness. I'm like, the more I try to go into mindfulness, the more anxiety I have. It's like, okay, be calm. Like, what do you mean, be calm? The world is totally going dark right now. How can I be calm?
So true.
Right? And by the way, everybody, it's funny just to bring that up, because everyone feels that way right now. It's like we are living in such times of existential despair. And, yeah.
You're messed up.
But like you noticed, I look at life completely different than most people, because I'm like, look around. It's not working. It's got to break down. Breakdown sucks. It never feels good. But it's like, that's how we grow. You don't grow without pain, and we need to grow into something that's going to serve us.
And I agree that's inevitable. Yeah. But the process itself. I am how do I say this? A person that believes that there's a silver lining to all negative things in the world, right? Which is, I think, what you also believe. But to get to that process has been so painful for so many people in the world today. I mean, right now, So yes, I'm a big believer that change is possible. I'm less of a fan that you need pain to get there. How's that?
It's not always fun, the process. But I mean, I think that there's always two sides to every story. There's the mental emotional stress, because what we chatted about, the self-depreciation, understanding that flow of energy of the mental thought and how that creates that electromagnetic effect that gets felt by the body, experienced by the body, and then the body's reacting to it, is that if we didn't have that pain response, we would never make a change. So we wouldn't there would be more chaos, there'd be more entropy, there'd be more disorder, and we'd never have a feedback mechanism. Like you like the heart rate variability because it's constantly giving you feedback. Meditation, unless you're getting that feedback from some type of biofeedback device, you don't really know. So it's nice.
Yes, right.
It's nice to be able to do that work, but also, to have technology and devices to say like, hey, you did it great. Maybe make this little slight change, etc. But that way we don't have to stay in that cycle of pain, continuing to do the same thing over and over, but,
Yep.
get an insanity.
But you're exactly right. You can have the best drug protocol, using these amino acids, this dietary supplement, this drug, that drug, the perfect cocktail. But if you don't get the energetic, I'll call it bioemotional, because I think that's probably a better word than energetic, because it has a negative connotation to professionals that like, oh, you're one of those people that believe in energy, So, but you're exactly right that's the first layer of healing, 100%.
Quantum physicists say that there actually is an energy. We just we label it as energy so we can kind of understand it, but it's really just all mathematics. It's all probability, which is interesting.
Right. So yes, it's interesting that you say that, because there were researchers that developed the first types of MRI scans that were based upon probability as opposed to deterministic areas. And that's something called fractional anisotropy, or FA, which I think, Nick, you're probably familiar with given your background in math and quantum understanding. Fractional anisotropy can be measured on MRI scans, by the way, and it's a marker of the fluidity of water through myelin. So people with various diseases, whether schizophrenia, autism, Alzheimer's, ALS, when you do these fancy studies, which are done only, fortunately right now, only on a research basis, but you often see that there's disruption in the flow of water in the brain. Mm-hmm. So yes, it all comes down to not only quantum physics, but how do we harness our understanding of quantum physics in an applicable way clinically. And I think that's always the gap in our understanding about how do we take these very, very well established mathematical principles to make them work in science and medicine.
You want to get really deep, Jay?
I don't know. I'm seeing Nicole like taking a.
Oh my gosh. I want to bring this all together really quick for our audience. So you hold that thought, Mr. Carruthers. So we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about viruses. We talked about the correlation of gut dysbiosis. We've talked about neuroinflammation that are all playing a role in different neurological conditions, from ALS to autism, Asperger's, and bipolar, many things in between. So I think that the moral of the story here is that, one, there's a lot of possibilities, but two, it's all about data. People need to have a better understanding. They need a team of experts to understand like what is happening for you. And the other factor that I want to bring home.
Let's talk about that. That's a very interesting point to bring up, because I agree with you 100%, because the problem right now with how we diagnose conditions like ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's are really, especially in the case of ALS, we use subjective rating scores, right? We use what's called the ALS functional rating score, which is purely subjective. I mean, it's like you can ask, well, how's your drooling today? Okay, is it a 1 to a 5? Unfortunately, that's been the standard of how we identify efficacy of these various interventions and drugs that have been approved by the FDA. My point is, to your point, is the single most important objective biomarker in patients with ALS or other neuromuscular diseases for that matter, is assessing objectively respiratory function, because that is the primary reason that the patients with these conditions die. So we need to pay much more attention to pulmonary function. And I think unfortunately, I think most neurologists don't understand that ALS is a systemic disease. It's not only a motor neuron disease, it affects bulbar and affects the diaphragm, and that's the leading cause of death. So if we want to talk about objective biomarkers, we need to talk about specific looking at pulmonary function tests that look at not only carbon dioxide diffusion, but also nitric oxide diffusion. And unfortunately, most pulmonologists are not even aware that these studies exist, but these are the most important studies that we need to do. And I always, as a person that is not in research, I'm a clinical physician, I've always pushed the idea of N of 1 studies. And N of 1 studies means that it's a recognized way of studying a patient without getting them a placebo. And it also is a validated marker for treatment, even on the basis of FDA allowance of those studies. In other words, there's many FDA approved N of 1 studies, particularly for patients with rare diseases where there is no study, there is no drug, or there's only a placebo that they may get as opposed to enrolling in one of these types of studies.
I love that's Q, isn't it? Screaming.
Okay. I was gonna I don't know
That's
if
our
you guys
son.
can hear him, but he's yelling pretty loud.
Oh yeah,
He agreed. He was cheering. He agreed with you.
he agrees.
Oh, good.
And I know that one of the markers that you've shared with me, sorry, Nick, I just wanted to mention that you've also introduced me to a very specific neurodegenerative marker that's available even through LabCorp. And that's, I think, something that people need to know about because, again, there are a lot of doctors that are operating out of the subjective, and that subjective rating is, they're essentially leading with you're progressing, you're getting worse. And we don't really have actual data to say if you are or you're not. And so again, that goes back to the mental emotional component of just continually losing hope of I'm just doomed based on this diagnosis.
Right.
You were talking, most people don't think about it being connected with the respiratory, the pulmonary issue, but that, like you said, that's the major cause of death. And on I'll just say the word energy aspect, but on the aspect of polarity is that a healthy cell has a right spin. But when it loses enough energy, it will actually flip inversely and it will start, the electro aspect will start spinning to the left. When it does that, it doesn't have the ability to uptake and hold on to oxygen. So then you have that decreased capability for oxygen. And then, but you take that up kind of the level and it's like, well, what decreases the energy? Well, the capacity to appreciate yourself, to love yourself. So if you get to that mental emotional state of self-depreciation where you hit that action potential, that you actually change the polarity, the electrical spin of that cell, well, that's a main factor that decreases its inability to uptake oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So then you do red light therapy, which is simple, and you're increasing, it's outside of you, but you're allowing the client to be able to have enough energy. And we know that our environment, in energy is bidirectional. So we can give them energy from the external component to be like, okay, maybe I do have some hope. Maybe I can start appreciating myself.
And one of my exercises that I give my patients, which I should, I'm like the doctor with shoes, the shoemaker with holes in my shoes, but what I recommend to patients, which I probably should do for myself, is to do a 10-minute sort of AM gratitude, where they walk out, look at the sun, but cover their eyes because you don't want the direct sunlight. So I tell people to go out and look at the light with your eyes covered for about 10 minutes, and just try to put yourself in a mental state of gratitude, because gratitude heals everything. It really does. And it's something that I've had to learn for myself. for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a Grateful Dead head, so right away, people that to follow the Grateful Dead, know that the first word in that name is grateful. That's what attracted people like us old Deadheads to that music, even though like many people of different generations can't stand their music. Like Nicole, maybe, I'm not sure.
Hey, I'm down.
Okay, good. But where am I going on this? Oh, just as a simple exercise that people need to do to self-affirm, because I find, I say to myself, I really should love myself, or that God loves me. Like, people say, oh, God loves you. I'm like, how are you so sure about that? Like, I don't know, I'm not taking it on face value that God loves me. You gotta earn his love. You can't just say God loves me, So I'm not sure where I'm at with God, but
I might be on the naughty list. I'm not sure.
That's right. That's right.
We've been watching a lot of Christmas movies in this house, so. Oh my gosh, right. That's hilarious.
The best Christmas oh my God, the best movie for everyone should watch was with the guy who loses his business. These mean guys take over his bank.
Back with Eddie Murphy back in the day? No,
this is way before Eddie Murphy. You kidding? No, this is a black and white film.
I don't know.
Oh my God. I may need to take some of my own suggestions about my MCI, mild cognitive improvement. But anyway, what else do you guys want to ask? I know that your time is running up, and we could talk for hours. And in fact,
I know. But, I want to. So we've been on for a while, and I don't want anybody's head to explode. But I want to kind of wrap this up and bring it all together for the listener, because I think that, with talking about all these different things, again, going back to what I said before, it's all a matter of understanding that everybody's blueprint is so different. So yes, you might have neurodegenerative symptoms, and one, don't identify with a diagnosis as your end all be all, because there's a lot of other factors that have contributed to the symptomatology. And if you can understand what those are, you can actually do something about it. And what I love about, you've been in practice for a very long time. You've worked with a lot of different people, and you're one of the smartest people that I know. And, you're coming back and saying that, yes, there are different treatments that we can do. Yes, there are things from, red light therapy to different types of possible medications or, natural remedies, et cetera, food. But this also comes back to your mind, and it comes back to, do you have gratitude for anything in your life? And are you a victim to the symptoms and the diagnosis? And if we don't get that piece right, or we just don't address it at all, we're going to continue to see chronic illness as a whole, not necessarily just neurodegenerative disease. And it's just a factor that really needs to be talked about more. And I find that more of the practitioners that we have been gravitating towards and talking to that have been doing this a long time, we realize that we've pulled all the fancy stuff out. We pulled all the fancy protocols and supplements and therapies and all of it. And we realize that if someone is just in such a poor state mentally and emotionally, it is really, really hard for them to heal.
I know. That's so, so true. That's why I love the work that you guys do. I really do. I am, equally grateful to the work that you do and for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I think that we should continue these conversations over maybe a cold beer.
Yes.
For the holidays or something.
I would love that.
I think we had a great time.
Our audience is like, they drink beer? Oh my gosh. So where can people find you?
By the way, I do go to Dunkin' Donuts, by the way. And if you have a little time,
I'm judging you. The audience doesn't even need to judge you. I'm judging you.
I I was like, you say that, and I was like, oh, she's going to tear you
he
apart.
who has no sin, throw the first stone at you. Okay. So,
Hey, we were just in Italy, and then, I come back here and I'm like, even this fancy coffee that I buy has got nothing on the Italian coffee. So where can people find you? Because I am sure people are going to be very interested in more of your work. I know you've done some big speaking engagements. So tell us where, and we will obviously hyperlink everything below, and people will be able to find you easily.
Okay. So my website is www.Dr. Jay Lombard. I think it's that drjlombard.com. I think that's my email.
We're too much alike. Somebody asked me, I'd be like, I don't know. Like, talk to my marketing person. That's why I have one.
Yes, exactly. I think it's my website, drjlombard.com. And there's a little, people, it's funny when they look at my website, they go, who designed this? It's terrible. And I go, I designed it. So the first page is going to be like of a beautiful waterfall. I'm really into waterfalls. In fact, my hobby was Japanese gardens. When I was able to afford Japanese gardens. So I have this waterfall picture. My phone number should be on the first page. I haven't checked it recently. And then there's a couple of my podcasts I did. And some of my research is posted on that website. And looking forward to whoever feels that wants to be connected to me. It's funny, all the people I end up seeing over time are people who understand this mind-body relationship intrinsically. Because people who don't understand it, like, this guy is like, out to lunch somewhere, which by the way, my family thinks I am. So those people who think that, they're in good company. Okay.
Hey, us crazies got to stick together, so we're good. We'll build our own little community.
Exactly.
We thank you so much for being here. This was absolutely phenomenal. So for all of you listening, check him out. Put your comments below. We want to hear from you.
Great meeting you, Jay.